I hope participants were able to hear the things from the beginning.
So I should go back to the beginning?
Participants, I need your suggestion. Do you want ma'am to start from the beginning, or is it okay?
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, if it will be very good if suppose you start from beginning.
Okay.
It will be very good if suppose you will start from beginning.
Okay, I'll request ma'am if you can start from the beginning.
Okay, is there a way
Okay.
that I'm going to be able to see the chat?
Yes, ma'am. Now they can unmute and they will speak directly to you, ma'am.
Okay.
Because previously, because of some technical issues, they were not able to interact with you. Now they can unmute and speak with you.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome to Kinesthetic Learning. Put your whole body into it. I'm Deb Laurel. A little bit about me. I taught for the Executive Management Institute at the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Business for 30 years. I started when I was 2. I have been a management consultant with my own business for 35 years, and I've designed and delivered participatory training programs for 48 years. I don't know, people are going to introduce themselves verbally? How many people are there?
Ma'am, you want them to introduce yourself?
Good morning,
Introduce
ma'am.
yourself.
Good morning, ma'am. Dr. Ansari Sarwar Alam here, ma'am. I am working as assistant professor in the Department of Management Studies, B.S. Abdul Rahman Crescent Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. Ma'am, this is my humble suggestion. If suppose we will go with the introduction of each and every participant, it will take time. Some of them are getting technical glitches too. So it will be better if the class, directly we can start with the class or lecture. This is my humble suggestion.
Okay, so I'm going to just continue. Is that what you're recommending?
Yes, ma'am, because we have around, as of now, we have around 30 participants, so it will take some time. So
Okay.
we will be running shortage of time. So let's
Okay.
start the session.
All right. Then, how many of you worry about being able to engage your participants in your training programs?
Most of us, madam.
How many of you like to learn new skills?
Yes, most of us.
Chandra Kumar sir, you have to be a bit loud because your voice is not clear.
Yeah. Okay, madam. Most of us. Okay, so, answer will be yes for most of this.
Thank you. How many of you are curious about kinesthetic learning activities?
I think Taslima ma'am, you have any question?
No, I'm just agree with her.
Okay.
Okay, so our learning objectives are to define kinesthetic learning, to explain why it's important for all learners, to review 10 kinesthetic learning activities, and to have you select 2 activities you plan to implement once back in the classroom. I want to begin with a real-life story. I was auditing technical training for a utility, and one of the trainings had to do with repairing fluorescent lights. And the training was scheduled for a full day. The professor was engaging. He made jokes. He called people by name. He made it interesting, but what he was talking about was lighting theory, which was not what the training was supposed to be about. And he went on and on about lighting theory because that was something that excited him. And everyone in the class was interacting with him except for the young man sitting next to me. And he just sat there like a stone. He didn't smile, he didn't engage, he didn't laugh. And about an hour into the training, he raised his hand and he asked, "When are we going to work with the fluorescent lights?" And the professor said, "Well, not for a while." And the professor kept going on and on about lighting theory. And about an hour later, the young man raised his hand again and asked the very same question. And it suddenly occurred to me that he was a kinesthetic learner, that he needed to be doing something with his hands. So I looked in my pocketbook and I happened to have this large, I can hear other people. He happened to have this large rubber band. And so I tapped him on the shoulder and I gave him the rubber band and I said to him, "Play with it." 2 minutes after he started playing with the rubber band, he started engaging. Okay. He started engaging. He started laughing. He started responding. He became the same as everybody else in the room, enjoying the training. And when it was time for lunch, the professor came running over to him and he said, "Whatever you do, don't lose that rubber band," because it was quite clear that that was the key to having this young man be engaged. Now, there's been a lot of research that says there's no such thing as learning styles. And I have to accept the research. But I do feel that there are learning preferences, and this young man certainly had one. So when we talk about kinesthetic learning, what do we mean? Can anyone answer that? Okay. Well,
Rafiq, you can ask question.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I wanted to answer I believe kinesthetic, like when we say kinesthetic learning, so it means we're involving our body parts to acquire the knowledge that we want to have, or the skills, whatever. So without these kind of body movements, or it's the where we are involving our organs, the body parts, for learning, the one cannot learn. It's so. For example, like you mentioned, like we had a classmate or the one who was being there and who could only involve after having such kind of something like he could play with, or something which made him move. So I think that's one of the major part of learning. And sorry for noises beyond, I'm just in the office here, so just some more noises are there. Sorry for that. Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is movement focused. It doesn't always engage the whole body, but most often we want it to. So please consider these questions. Do you consider yourself a kinesthetics? Do you incorporate whole body movement activities in your training programs? And finally, would you enjoy participating in your own training programs? I have done train the trainer programs around the world, and very often when I asked the participants, the trainers, what they used in their training, it's not anything like what they would prefer if they were in the training class themselves. So why is kinesthetic learning important for all learners? Anybody want to answer that?
Kinesthetic learning is very important for all of us because by that we can understand that by that we can understand the behavior of the students, the way they are sitting, the way they are, the posture itself explains that what they want, whether they are boredom, whether they want some sort of energy, or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let me add to that. When we get people standing up, oxygen goes to the brain, which refreshes them, makes them clear, helps them think better. When we get them up and moving, it engages both sides of the brain because the corpus callosum in the middle has something to do with movement. Whole body learning engages the senses, and we remember things more easily when we have experienced them. All of these increase learning, retention, and recall. So now that we've talked about what kinesthetic learning is and why it's important for every learner, let's talk about some kinesthetic learning activities. Now, there are ones that are commonly used, hands-on, or simulations, or role plays, or games. I'm going to give you 10 that you may not have considered. And as we review each activity, please consider whether it's an activity you could use in your own training programs. The first is common ground questions, which is exactly what I did at the beginning. You create 3 or 4 questions about the topic or session, and you ask questions that will include all participants, beginning with how many of you? And you want them to be raising their hand. The idea is that the sooner you get them raising their hand, the more comfortable they will be in participating. And you want to ask enough questions so that ultimately everybody will raise their hand. Now, the example I'm going to give you right now has nothing to do with any topic we're discussing, but I could ask, how many of you are parents? Please raise your hand. Since not everybody would be a parent, I could then ask, how many of you were children? Please raise your hand. So it's nice if you can use some humor. The purpose of the activity is, as I mentioned, to prime participants to participate. You want to create a community of learners, and you want to focus participants on the topic. So could you use common ground questions? The second is called pair share. What you do is you ask 2 questions that will separate the seasoned or experienced people from the unseasoned or less experienced people. You have the unseasoned participants group with a seasoned participant, forming a group of 5. Now I say a group of 5 because that's how many I like to have around a table. You may be working with a auditorium, but I would keep it about 5. And the idea here is you're going to ask the experienced people What's something they wish they had been told when they were first starting out? And you have them think about that. You ask the less experienced participants, what do you wish you had, what have you always wanted to ask an experienced person? And then I generally have the experienced people, everybody stand up, the experienced people go to the left, the less experienced people go to the right. They think about what I've asked them to think about. And then I say, okay, now create a group of 5. Usually there are more inexperienced people than there are experienced people. So generally I'll have 1 experienced person with 4 unexperienced people with them. Give 8 to 10 minutes for the discussion, and then have the group members sit together. The purpose of this activity, you're going to honor the expertise in the room. You're going to co-opt the seasoned participants by giving them a role to play. I don't know about you, but I have had people come into classes where they feel they already know it all. And maybe they already know quite a bit. So why not use their expertise? This will provide unseasoned participants with a mentor, and you create new table groups or new seating groups. Because when people come into a training, very often they sit with the people they know, which is nice, but it's not a good way for them to learn. We want them to be interacting with different people because, quite honestly, in most training, a lot of the learning happens between the participants, not because the professor is in front of the room. So, for example, if we had been able to do a breakout group here, I would have said, if you're a seasoned trainer, share what you wish you had known when you first started out. If you are a new trainer, ask what you've always wanted to ask a seasoned trainer. Now, is this something that you could use?
Yes.
The third is called pop-ups. You ask a question. It has to be a question that you know people can answer. You have people with answers pop up or stand up in front of their chairs, and then they wait until you call on them and let them speak, and then they sit down. The purpose of this activity, it gives kinesthetic learners an opportunity to stand. Those are probably going to be the first people to jump up. You honor the knowledge and expertise in the room, and you avoid teaching what the participants already know. The fourth is to give breaks every 50 or 60 minutes. And you may not have thought of this as a kinesthetic activity, but it really is. You ideally want to give 10-minute breaks. You want them to get up and move and go somewhere else, or at least wander around the room. Before you send them out on that break, you give them something to think about that's related to the next topic. Then when they return, they'll be ready to jump right back into the learning. The purpose of the activity, it allows people to stand up, which brings oxygen to the brain, allows them to move around, which engages both sides of their brain, which increases retention. And it also gives time for the brain to digest new information. It has to make some mental models. If I were to give you a 10-minute break now, I would say during your 10-minute break, be thinking about the kinesthetic activities you currently use or have experienced.
Mechanical stroke described communication.
So what kinesthetic activities do you already use or have experienced? Could you answer?
Nirmala ma'am, can you mute yourself, ma'am? Nirmala ma'am, can you mute yourself?
Ma'am, usually I go with standing, and I usually I ask my student that some of them should stand and some of them should sit. Then I will be changing them, and I will be making some of them as a role play as an actor, so that this is the way out which I try my best to use this kinesthetic activities.
Thank you. Okay, so having them do role plays. Anyone else? What other kinesthetic activities?
Can you hear me? We'll make them to sit in groups and discuss about a particular topic and come out and then summarize what is that they feel about that particular topic in groups.
Okay, you have them sitting. You
In
have
groups.
them moving to sit in the
Yes.
group.
And then discuss on something, and then they'll come out with an activity or a report kind of thing.
Okay, so they're moving, but they are moving around.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. How
Can you
about
hear me,
someone
ma'am?
else?
Yes. Ma'am, can you hear me? Sorry. Hello.
Hello?
Sir, we can hear you, sir.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay. So, ma'am, actually, like myself, Dr. Rafi, I'm in the chemistry department. So we, by default, kind of like we believe that we have this kinesthetic activity because what we teach in the classroom, then we try to have those, like, for example, I said we teach some theoretical reaction, reaction theoretically in the classroom. Then we have the practical session of that in the laboratory. So it's like automatically they're involved in the, like, so all the body parts almost are involved in that because they use their hands, they move here and there to collect the reactions and the chemicals and all, and they start the reaction, so they are watching, they're observing. So I believe like this can fall under this kinesthetic activity. I believe
Oh,
like that.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's something that I would call a hands-on activity, but you're having them do what they need to learn.
Exactly.
Which is marvelous. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then we'll move on. Whoops. Sorry. The fifth activity is called a gallery walk. And the picture you see are people engaged in a gallery walk in Zambia. What you do is you take a topic, you write something different on 5 different, 3 or 5 flip charts. Let's see. I'm not a good chemist, so it's not easy for me to think of this. I'm going to have to give you a training idea. One question might be, how would you engage participants in a kinesthetic activity? Second one would be, what kinesthetic activities can you use? You see, so you have different questions. And then you create small groups, enough groups for each of the flip charts. And each group is given a different colored marker. And the way I create these groups is I have them think about the last digit in one of their phone numbers. And then based on that, how many of you have 0? Okay, I make sure that I get about 5 people. Here's a purple marker. How many of you have 1? All right, how many of you have 1 or 2? Okay, here's a blue marker. And then each group begins at a different flip chart. They brainstorm answers for 1 to 2 minutes, writing their answers on the flip chart. Then I ring a bell, but you can just clap to give a signal so they move clockwise to the next flip chart. And you continue until all groups have been to all of the flip charts. And you'll know because you have seen all of the colors. And then you have them report out. So it's a different way to do brainstorming. This checks to see if people have learned the content, and you can check to see what the participants already know. It gets participants on their feet and moving, and it adds an element of novelty using the different colored markers and the short brainstorming time. And the colored markers I use are fragrant, so they get the fragrance of that. The sixth activity is a PEG system. It's intended to help people retain information. So if you have a process or procedure that has a certain number of steps, what you do is you number each step in the process, and then you come up with an action that represents each step. And then you have them practice the actions until they've memorized them. It helps retention and recall, and it provides for whole body learning. So I am actually going to lead you in a PEG system. So I need you all to stand up. So please stand and repeat my movements. Hopefully you can see me. So this is a PEG system for 6 lesson design steps. The first step is conducting a needs assessment. So the activity for that first step is to cup one hand and pretend that you're pouring something into the other. So you cup your hand and pour something into it. That's the needs assessment. The second step is goals. And I say you need to have 2 goals. What is it that people need to learn, and why should they care? So you point forward for both goals and you walk forward for the 2 goals. So let's go back to the first one. For needs assessment, you cup one hand and pour something into it. For goals, you point 2 fingers and go forward for the 2 goals. The third is learning objectives. So you pretend to shoot an arrow, because of course that's what we want to do, get people going there. So needs assessment, pour something into your cup. For goals, walk forward with 2 fingers pointing. For learning objectives, use the arrow and the bow. Then we want our agenda. So we count each finger for the agenda. For learning activities, so that we encompass as many as we can, we use binoculars. Okay. We cup a hand behind our ear and we hop up and down or turn around. And then for evaluation, you pretend that you are a detective and you have a, it's not a microscope, a lens, and you are looking for something. So that is a peg system. You can sit down. All right. They are really not difficult to create. And very often, I have the participants create it themselves, and then they teach everybody else how to do it. And that's one good way for them to learn it and retain it. And then over the course of the day, after a break, in the middle of something, I will ask them, please stand. Show me what it looks like when you're dealing with goals. Show me what it looks like when you're doing an evaluation. The seventh activity is called rotating flip charts. You prepare different but related questions on different flip charts. And small groups begin at the different flip charts. So if you have 4 flip charts, you have 4 small groups, and they write their answers on for that flip chart. They're brainstorming. Then, when they're done, they stroll to the other flip charts and edit what the other groups have written, either by adding something or crossing out words to make the point more accurate. So it's a different take on brainstorming. The purpose of the activity, it adds novelty to writing on a flip chart, gives them time to read what others have written, and gives them license to clarify the content on the other flip charts. So is this something that you could use? The 8th is a scavenger hunt. You can use it when you're dealing with content to have them hunt for key information or policy provisions or procedures or citations or equations or quotes. If you're using it as an icebreaker at the beginning of a session, you can ask them to hunt for something on their desk or around them that represents them, and then they would explain what it was. The way you do it is to create a worksheet with questions or statements that require information to be filled in. And then you have copies of the source books and materials laying out around the room. And if I'm having people look for certain paragraphs or certain law or certain procedures, I will highlight them in the source books. You create pairs and ask them to find the information to complete the worksheet. And then you debrief afterwards to ensure everybody has obtained the correct information. This is a way to avoid lecturing about a dry topic. Many times we say, well, the topic's dry, so I'm afraid it's going to be boring. There's no reason why any training should be boring. You shouldn't really be lecturing unless you know something that other people don't know. And that's why this is very difficult for me. I'm used to getting a lot of feedback. You get people up on their feet and moving. And very importantly, you give participants an opportunity to learn how to locate the information for future reference. The 9th activity is a relay race. You set up you're going to have 2 teams. You set up flip charts. And here I want people to brainstorm learning activities. And they would be spaced far enough apart so people could write after each letter. And that's the point. They are going to compete with each other to run up to the flip chart and come up with a learning activity that begins with the L, or begins with the E, begins with the A. They don't have to do it in order, but in order for them to win, they have to have completed an answer that begins with each of those letters. So you write the words on 2 flip charts. You set the flip charts 12 paces away from the starting point, and I just use blue masking tape to lay out a line so that people know where they have to stand behind. You create 2 teams, and then they know they have to fill out a word or phrase that begins with each letter. The way I create the teams is I have people stand up, go to the front or the back of the room, whichever has more space, and I have them line up based on the month and day of their birth, not the year. So January 1st through December 31st. And so once they are standing there in that order, and they have fun doing that, I have them count off by 1 or by A. So 1A, 1A. So one group is 1 and one group is A. They know that they're going to compete against each other. I ring a bell or clap my hands to get them going. It raises the energy. And it's very interesting. I have been with groups where I thought, I'm not so sure that people are going to be willing to do this. And it's interesting. Everybody does it. It gets everyone on their feet and moving. They're focusing on recalling information that they've just learned. So we build on adults' enjoyment of problem solving as well as competition, and it's a fun way to check retention. Now, I'm an accelerated learning trainer, which means that I like to engage as many senses as possible. So in my groups, when they come into a room, each table has a bowl of candy, a variety of candy. They have cush balls, which they can squeeze. They have wands. They have, I can't even think of the word now. Pipe cleaners. A lot of different things that they can manipulate. And I also give prizes. So the prize for this, once they're done, and I make sure that both groups finish, even if one group finished first, I have the group that worked with flip chart 1 come and look at the flip chart for A and see if they accept everything that was written or if there's some duplication that they have to cross out. And then I have the other group come and look at the other flip chart to do the same. Ultimately, it doesn't matter who won because I have these plastic back scratchers that are different colors, and I give it to everybody.
Is it, Professor, is it actually the topic you will tell them to prepare for that, or maybe you do it in the class itself? First you finish teaching the topic, then they do this activity, or they will do it?
Yes. You're doing it to check retention.
Okay.
So it would be after you have taught it.
Okay. So that's like a similar activity what even we used to do. So we teach some topic and then we'll tell them to go, as you said before also, we give a break for them. So you go out and then come back and do some mind mapping. So even in the blackboard, so they used to do mind mapping. So you need to, we have two groups. So which group is making a very good mind map? So they will, it's kind of activity also we used to do.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
I love it. Yes. They're not running though. And
Yeah,
then
they're
when
not
they're
running actually. Yeah, but they are moving. They're not running. They will be moving.
And the last one that I wanted to mention is the walkabout. And this is something that you're going to use at the very end of training. The common ground questions start of the training. You have the break in the middle where you're giving them something to think about so that when they come back from the break, they're refreshed and they're ready to talk about the topic. We have the relay race, which you want to use in the afternoon, particularly when people get more dragged out. This is a way to get them engaged. And the walkabout you do at the end. You have participants answer a question that asks them, what's your key learning from the training? And then you have them partner with someone they haven't worked with before during the class. So you have these pairs. You let them walk wherever they want for 5 minutes. Very often people will go outside or walk on in the hall, or they may even walk around the room. And they take turns explaining how they plan to use what they learned. And when they return, you have them give each other a high five. The purpose of this activity, it lets participants talk about what they plan to do, which increases the probability they will do it. It also gets the participants up and moving. So we talked about 10 different activities that are kinesthetic in nature. And I'm interested in knowing which 2 activities you plan to use. Here they are again. The common ground questions, the pair share, the pop-ups, the breaks, the gallery walk, the peg system, rotating flip charts, scavenger hunt, relay race, and walkabout. So which ones did you feel would be most useful to you?
So I prefer relay race and gallery walk. Maybe it's as you like. Maybe it's in the afternoon time after finishing their lunch. Maybe they're sleepy. I think that is the right time to use these activities. I feel.
Absolutely. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Someone else? Is there anyone else?
I will be going with the I will be going with the second one dash.
I'm sorry, I'm having
Students that
trouble
what
hearing.
sort of things? Okay. I'm repeating it. Yeah, ma'am, I'm repeating it. I will go with the second one, pair share, second, and first. First, second.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, I would prefer pair share and walkabout.
Okay, wonderful. What else? Who else?
I'll be using scavenger hunt for certain areas wherein latest information needs to be brought into the classes, where a continuous updation is required. So there I will be using scavenger hunt.
Okay, thank you. Who else?
Am I audible?
I'm sorry?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so I prefer, this is Dr. Mayank Pandya, and I prefer scavenger hunt. This is what I am soulfully, this is my favorite one. And rotating flip chart, I'm doing little different way in context with jigsaw, kind of jigsaw.
Okay. Thank you. Who else?
Good morning, madam. This is Professor Lakshmi.
Hi.
Yes. Hi. And I prefer pair share, and this one walkabout and rotating charts. These seem to be very adaptive.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Who else?
Good morning, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, I would like to prefer the same gallery walk and the first one, common ground questions I used to prefer, ma'am.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Who else?
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
I prefer common ground question, pair share, and breaks. And I did pair share almost 3 times in previous semester. And rotating flip chart is a new idea. I would love to use this one.
Great. Thank you. Who's next? All right. Thank you. So, what do you like about kinesthetic learning? Please tell me.
Making the participants actively taking part in the classroom learning process.
Thank you. Yes.
I think this will help blood flow all the places, and they will be very active in the class.
Be active.
Yeah. Maybe
Yes,
I feel.
thank you.
And make others active.
I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing that.
Do you hear me, madam? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Kinesthetic learning, it may be refers to teaching learning for acting learning through to become attentive.
Okay, thank you.
It breaks boredom and monotony.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay.
I feel that it reduces teachers' talk time and encourages learner-centric activities, learner-centric teaching.
Yes. Yes, and I call them learning activities because they're focused on the learner. I'm sorry about my cat. I don't know why she decided to do this. So do you have any questions?
Student can remove their fatigue by this kinesthetic learning system.
Thank you. So are there any questions? Okay, well, if there are not, The motto of kinesthetic learning is tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. Benjamin Franklin. We want to engage them. People remember experiences, they remember stories, they remember those things that have engaged their senses. And so the more we can do that in our classrooms, the more learning is going to happen, and the more it will be enjoyable for both the participants and us. I want to thank you very much. If you are interested in getting a copy of this PowerPoint, please contact me, dlaurel@laurelandassociates.com, and I'll be happy to send it to you. So I want to thank you again for having me.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Participants, if you have any questions, you can ask ma'am, because we still have half an hour.
Madam, regarding, am I audible?
Yes, Lakshmi ma'am, you are audible.
Yes, madam. Kinesthetic learning, comparing to previous decade, the percentage of kinesthetic learners are vast or large, you can say. Whether it is a scenario of everywhere or it depends on the nature of region, that's what I want to inquire.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you tell me what was said?
Madam, previous decade we are not much bothering about kinesthetic learning. Is it active learning process we have focused? But in the present scenario, we are talking more about the kinesthetic learning. Whether it depends on the region or it is the growing nature of the student community. That's what I am asking. In your observation, how do you feel about the percentage of kinesthetic learners nowadays?
How do I feel about what?
Ma'am, can Lakshmi ma'am, what I have understood, I'll tell to madam. Madam, what she is asking, previously we were focusing more on active learning. Now we are focusing more on kinesthetic learning. So she wants to know from you that this kinesthetic learning depends on the region, or there is a change in the nature of the students. That is why we are using kinesthetic learning. Basically, she wants to know, okay, previously we were using focusing more on active learning, and now we are focusing more on kinesthetic learning. So why is it so?
Quite honestly.
Am I
correct, Lakshmi ma'am?
Yes, madam, exactly. You are transferring the correct information. Thank you.
Quite honestly, I don't know the difference between active learning and kinesthetic.
I think madam lost her connection.
Oh dear.
Lakshmi. Ma'am, you can unshare your screen. Hello. Lakshmi ma'am, I think madam lost her connection.
Okay.
Okay.
Just for the discussion.
For all the candidates, ma'am, I have shared you the Google Meet link. For next session, kindly connect to that link, ma'am.
Okay.
We will leave the team and we will join with the Google Meet. I have already shared the Google Meet link in the group. Still, if anyone is facing problem, you can drop a message in the group itself, WhatsApp group.
Ma'am, I think still she's there in the connection.
Ma'am, hello, Deborah ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Can you answer Lakshmi ma'am's question?
quite honestly, I don't know the difference between active learning and kinesthetic learning. That's my problem in answering the question.
Okay, ma'am, I have
Can you repeat the question, ma'am?
We can take it in another way, madam. Why we need
Yeah.
to focus more on the kinesthetic learning nowadays in the present scenario? What is the
Yeah.
need for that? Like that. You don't make comparison
Ma'am,
of previous
now
years.
she is asking the need of kinesthetic learning in current scenario.
So why are we using kinesthetic learning now?
Yes.
Yes. In the current scenario, what is the bare need that we need to discuss? Shall we arrive some solutions out of this discussion, I think.
I'm an accelerated learning trainer, and I have always used kinesthetic learning and kinesthetic activities. And the reason we do that is the more people are moving, the more they're engaging their senses, the greater the likelihood that they will remember what they're learning, because they're getting different